Maintenance for rebound hammer parts mainly includes measurements of pointer length, pointer friction, separation point at 100, flare angle, wear degree of flange, and working length of tension spring, and inspection on service condition of buffer spring. Then debug or replace according to the condition whether it is qualified or not. 1. Measurement of pointer length. Firstly, clamp the pointer with vernier caliper to measure the total length of horizontal projection. Secondly, subtract half of the length of the pointer block. Then get the pointer length. The pointer length should be 20 plus minus 0.2 mm. 2. Debugging of pointer friction force. After cleansing the pointer pivot, you can use the force meter to test the friction force. Note: the force meter should be perpendicular to the pointer pivot and move horizontally. The standard value of pointer friction force is within the range of 0.65 plus minus 0.15 Newton. If the force is out of this range, debug again. When the friction force is greater than the standard value, separate the two opposite pointer pieces on the pointer pivot outward to reduce the friction force. It is better to adjust the value to 0.65 Newton. Note: please ensure symmetry on both sides and uniform friction force. When the friction force is less than the standard value, gently press the two pointer pieces inward by hand to increase the friction force. 3. Measurement of the spherical radius at the end of the impact rod. Use a radius gauge to visually judge in light. The spherical surface at the end of the impact rod should be smooth without cracks, muddles, or rust, and the spherical radius R should be 25 plus minus 1.0. The impact rod of Langley concrete rebound hammer is produced according to lower deviation, so its spherical radius R is generally 24. In use, the spherical radius will become larger. Therefore, the service life of the impact rod can be greatly improved. When the service spherical radius R is greater than 26, replace a new impact rod. 4. Debugging at separation point at 100. Step 1. Detection on separation point at 100. Before testing separation point, remove the scale and then press the rebound hammer vertically downward on the horizontal plane. When the exposed part of the impact rod is less than 1/3, stop and slowly move the pointer block upward by hand until at the scale of about 90 with a slight sound of buckling. Then slowly decompress the rebound hammer to let the impact rod slide downward slowly. Stop when the pointer block follows up and compress reversely until the rebound hammer hits. Next, lock the button and visually check whether the red line of pointer coincides with a tick mark of 100. If they are coinciding, the separation point is qualified. If they are not coinciding, debugging is required. Step 2. Adjust the zeroing screw. Note: do not adjust the separation point to influence the rebound value, and do not adjust the zeroing screw casually. Only when the separation point at 100 is unsatisfied, the height of the zeroing screw at the back cover can be adjusted to the normal separation point. Specific method: when the pointer is not at the tick mark 100, visually estimate or measure the distance between the red line of the pointer block and the tick mark 100 on the casing with vernier caliper. Then measure the distance between the vertex of the zeroing screw and the plane of back cover and record. Then use two wrenches, one is fixed on the fastening nut and the other is fixed on the zeroing screw, and screw in opposite directions to loosen the nut. When the pointer is lower than the tick mark 100, adjust the screw height clockwise by hand. When it is higher than the tick mark 100, adjust the screw height counterclockwise and lock the nut tightly. Then measure whether the separation point is qualified. If unqualified, it will be adjusted again until reaching the tick mark 100. Note: the zeroing screw should be tightened after adjusted. Step 3. Install the graduating scale. Install the graduating scale on the corresponding position of the casing with a tick mark 100 facing backward. And then gently tighten 6 small screws. 5. Debugging a pointer flare angle. When the rebound hammer is compressed, the flare angle of the pointer piece may be too large if the pointer moves upwards. So, stop compression at this time to avoid damaging the pointer piece. The correct maintenance steps are as follows. When the flare angle is too large, it should be shrunk. First, remove the pointer pivot and pointer block from the casing. Then pass the pointer block through one end of the pointer pivot and press the pointer block toward the pointer pivot by hand to make the bevel angle slightly smaller. Next, measure the vertical distance, including the diameter of the pointer pivot between the vertex of the pointer block and the pointer pivot with a caliper, and the distance should be about 6.5 millimeters. Then assemble the rebound hammer and conduct rebound test. If the flare angle is still unsatisfied, it is necessary to debug again. If the pointer does not move or trembles after starting the rebound hammer, that may be due to much small flare angle of the pointer piece. When the flare angle is too small, it should be expanded. Gently separate the pointer piece outward from the bottom to slightly expand the bevel angle. In this process, ensure that the pointer piece is straight because the bent and deformed pointer piece cannot be used again. 6. Flange inspection. When the rebound value of the rebound hammer is unstable, the flange should be inspected in time. If the width of the flange groove becomes wider or the flange is seriously worn, the flange should be replaced with a new one. The original width of flange groove is 6.3 millimeters, and the width after wear should not be greater than 6.5 millimeters. 7. Measurement of spring working length. When measuring the working length of spring, you should take out the internals from the casing in advance and put them on the workbench naturally. Let the spring seat free and measure the distance between the spring end of the spring seat and the bottom spring plane of the impact hammer with the caliper jaw for external measurement. Rotate the spring and measure in 3 angles. Finally, obtain the average length. The working length of the spring should be 61.5 plus minus 0.3 millimeters. If the value is greater than 61.5 plus minus 0.3 millimeters, adjust the hooking hole of the tension spring on the spring seat. Adjustment method. When the working length is greater than 61.8 millimeters, use some tool such as slotty screwdriver to raise the spring on the spring seat, and retract the spring into an appropriate hole on the spring seat. During each hole adjustment, the length can be reduced by about 0.5 millimeters. It is recommended to slightly adjust 1 or 2 holes. After reinstallation, measure until it is satisfied. If the spring is deformed seriously, replace the spring with a new one. 8. Replacement of buffer spring and hook. When the buffer spring is broken, crushed, or seriously worn, replace it with new one. When the hook is worn, replace it with new one in time. 9. Check whether the center guide rod is bent. Put the center guide rod on the platform or the glass or lean it against the square. And visually check whether the center guide rod is bent. The bent guide rod will have a great impact on the rebound value.